The film started with the naming ceremony of their child, Mr. Edward and Evelyn. While the pastor introduced everybody that was seated at the gathering, Mr. Edward noticed the sad look on Evelyn's face. She seems to be lost in thought. He tried getting her to be excited and flow with the occasion, but she remained sad and distracted by her thought. After the naming ceremony, Mr. Edward confronted his wife, Evelyn, in their bedroom about her behavior during the naming ceremony. He wanted to know why she sneaked into the room without saying goodbye to their guest. But she pretended and claimed that she was having pain in her tummy due to the surgery she had during delivery. She said the pain comes and goes, and that during the ceremony, the pain reoccurred, and that this time it was very intense and she could not breathe well. The husband did not believe her, but somehow suggested they see a doctor the next day. As they slept, Evelyn had a dream where she was visited by the Lord. He asked her what she was carrying in her arms. Evelyn told him she is carrying their baby. The Lord was disappointed in her, and he asked Evelyn why she did not wait for him to bless her. Evelyn said to the Lord that he was taking too long to come. The Lord told her that she doesn't know the ripple effect of what she has done, and he left her begging and crying to him to forgive her and carried the baby. Evelyn woke up from the dream and began to ponder. At the same time, Mr. Edward was also having a dream where he was cuddling his son. A strange man came to him, and after exchanging greetings, he told him he came to see his son, Melambwa Dakushi. This man claimed that Mr. Edward's child is his own. Mr. Edward woke up screaming Evelyn's name. He told Evelyn his dream and how someone was claiming that their son belongs to him. Evelyn dismissed the dream and encouraged her husband to pray. The next morning, while sitting at the dining table, Mr. Edward was reflecting on the dream, and he confronted Evelyn again and told her that the dream was not just an ordinary dream. Edward asked Evelyn why she was always moody, as if she has a pain in the heart. But Evelyn argued with him, and Edward left and went upstairs. When Edward came downstairs, Evelyn somehow spoke to him. She was able to manipulate him to believe it was just an ordinary dream. They both resolved their misunderstanding, and Edward left to work. Later on, Evelyn heard screams from upstairs where her son was napping. She struggled to open the door, but the door refused to open. She rushed downstairs and back upstairs. Then suddenly the door opened, and she entered and carried her son. Melendra Dashiki appeared, sitting on a chair in the room. He told Evelyn that she will not be lucky next time. Pretending not to know him, Evelyn asked him, "Who are you?" He told her to get out of her pretense and reminded her of how she got the child from him through one of his agents living in Calabar. Melendra Dashiki reminded her of the many times he had appeared to her, but she seems to pretend not to know him. He also reminded her about what happened on the day she delivered the baby. On that day, she had a difficult labor, which made her deliver through a cesarean section. During the delivery, Melendra Dashiki appeared to Evelyn, demanding she accept that the child she is about to deliver belongs to him as well. But Evelyn refused and claimed the child belongs to her and her husband. Melendra tried to kill the baby, but luckily, her husband rushed in and shouted, "In Jesus' name." Evelyn delivered a bouncing baby boy. As Evelyn pondered after delivery, Melendra Dashiki came again and told Evelyn she will not be lucky next time. Evelyn screamed, and the nurses came asking if she was all right. Later on, Mr. Edward came with items for her. Dashiki reappeared. Evelyn screamed. When Mr. Edward asked what happened, Evelyn claimed that she was feeling a sharp pain in her tummy, and she begged her husband to pray. Immediately, Dashiki disappeared. The screams of the baby woke Evelyn up from her trance, and she went up to check on the baby. While carrying the baby, she started to reflect on everything that had happened, how the fake agent visited the husband and her in their home. During her visit, she introduced herself as Melion Obanisi, a prophetess who has a ministry in Calabar, and further invited her, Evelyn, to see her in Calabar. Evelyn's husband was not comfortable with her visit. He begged his wife not to have anything to do with the prophetess and made Evelyn promise him, which she reluctantly did. Later on, she had a dream where she saw the Lord, who encouraged her to wait for the promise of the Father. The next morning, Evelyn traveled to Calabar but lied to her husband that she was going to Lagos to see her sister. She met the prophetess, and the prophetess prayed for her. She manifested and was given something to eat. The prophetess advised her to stay the night at the guest house, that she was going to have a divine visitation that night. She even told her not to eat that night so that she can do overnight fast. So that night while she slept, she was indeed visited by a spiritual husband who introduced himself as Melandra Gashiki. He danced with her and slept with her and promised to give her a male child. She woke up that morning pondering about the dream. Then the prophetess entered and asked her of her experience during the night. She tried to tell the prophetess that she didn't understand her dream, but the prophetess influenced the discussion and told her she is already blessed, and told her the only thing remaining was for her to seal up the blessing by sleeping with her husband in order for the blessing to remain. She warned her not to tell anybody of her experience here, because if she does, she will be visited with a terrible sickness and she and her baby will die. Later on that evening, her pastor visited with his wife and told Evelyn of the invitation by their GO. He said Evelyn was to come and give testimony on the Waiting Mother Conference to encourage other women who are still waiting on the Lord. But due to guilt, she refused to jump at the offer, but instead said she was going to pray about it. Her husband, Edward, could not understand why she said she has to pray about it. He tried to convince Evelyn to say yes, but she refused and still said she would pray about it. On their way going home, the pastor and the wife contemplated how they were going to inform Daddy Gio of the news of Evelyn being reluctant to testify. Meanwhile, Daddy Gio had a revelation about the invitation and he called the pastor. He told him he has cancelled the invitation based on the revelation he had from God. Then afterwards, the pastor put a call across and told Mr. Edward that Daddy Gio has cancelled the invitation. Mr. Edward was disappointed in his wife, Evelyn. Then, in the dream, Evelyn saw herself in chains and she pleaded to the Lord to help set her free. But the Lord refused. He told her of how she thwarted his plans of making her to be an evangelist who he would have sent to go all over the world to encourage waiting women. He said if only she had waited 6 months more, her blessing would have come. The Lord pointed to Melandra Gashiki, who was also invited to the meeting. Gashiki claimed that Evelyn and her son belongs to him, but the Lord defended Evelyn and advised Evelyn to go and do the needful in order for her shackles to fall off of her. That same time, Mr. Edward was also dreaming. Melandra Gashiki came with force to claim the baby. Melandra Gashiki said the covenant has been broken and that he wants to carry his son he loaned to Edward and Evelyn. Gashiki told Mr. Edward that their waiting was the fruitless wait of compromise, and he revealed that the wife Evelyn had entered into a covenant with him. He struck Mr. Edward with a knife and blood gushed out in the dream. Mr. Edward woke up immediately and started screaming, "Blood!" Mr. Edward asked Evelyn to tell him who Melandra Gashiki was, but because of the oath of secrecy, she kept quiet and was considering it. Then Mr. Edward called the pastor that night, who had later learned Evelyn had an encounter with Melion Obanisi, and the woman was a fake prophetess, although the pastor did not reveal anything to Mr. Edward. Evelyn came to the dining room where Mr. Edward had just finished speaking to the pastor on phone. Mr. Edward followed after her, insisting that Evelyn should confess. Then, as she was about to confess, Melandra Gashiki suddenly appeared and started flogging her with a whip. Mr. Edward did not see him. Only Evelyn was seeing him. Melandra Gashiki threatened Evelyn that he was going to kill her if she confessed to her husband. But she didn't care and was about to confess. He whipped her again, and Evelyn fainted. While in the spirit, she kept begging the Lord to release her from the shackles. The Lord empowered her, and she woke up. Gashiki came again to stop her from confessing. But with boldness, she sat on the chair with her husband and told the husband that Gashiki was there also. And in agreement with prayers and the words from the Bible, they both confronted Gashiki. Gashiki was defeated. The Lord later appeared to her in the spirit and told her to go and sin no more. She was finally set free from the shackles that was put on her by Gashiki. Unfortunately, their baby died. Mr. Edward and Evelyn cried bitterly. That same time, their pastor and Daddy Gio came visiting and found them in tears. The pastor and Daddy Gio consoled them. Later on, Evelyn knelt down, confessed, and begged the husband to forgive her. The pastor and Daddy Gio came again to check up on them. They encouraged Mr. Edward and his wife. They also prayed for both of them. Months later, Evelyn became pregnant and gave birth to the promised child, a bouncing baby boy. The moral lesson in the film is that all Christian couple seeking and believing God for a child should learn to wait patiently for the Lord's promise, because looking the other way, which is the way of the devil, will make them get into eternal bondage and somehow make them have children that the devil will also lay claim to. God's promises bring peace and lasting joy into one's heart. Remember, Evelyn was never happy even after giving birth to the baby she has waited for 10 years to have. Thank you.